All right, we covered carbohydrates. Now we're getting into amino acids. Remember we talked about functional groups. An amino acid has a carboxylic acid functional group on one end and an amine functional group on the other end. You see it's separated with this carbon. There's a hydrogen on the top and an R group on the bottom. Now the R group, depending on what the R group is, will tell you what amino acid it is. At physiological pH, it doesn't exist like this. It exists as NH3 plus on this side, COO minus. The hydrogen, the H plus moves from here to here. You get a positive charge on one end, a negative charge on the other. Overall, there's no charge. It's positive and negative. But it becomes polar that way. You got a positive end and a negative end, just like a magnet. Special name for this. This is called, try this again. A zwitterion. So depending on the pH of the solution, you can either make this positive, negative, or neutral, and also what the R group is. If the R group is a methyl group, a CH3 group, we have the amino acid alanine. And you know, there's 20 essential amino acids in your human body. I don't expect you to remember all of them. So, how do we make, well, let's just say they can react with each other. And if we line them up, because they're a plus and a negative, they're going to line up like a series of magnets. So here's the carboxylic end of one, the carboxylic acid end. Here's the amino end. If you look, what is that? HHO. Water. If you put them together, we can do a reaction where we remove the water. Okay, so we lose water. And we could. So now we have C double bond O and H. Remember our functional groups, that's an amide. So we form an amide. And we can do this all the way down the line. So here we have alanine, because the R group is a CH3. Serine, the R group is a CH2OH. Glycine, where are we here? The R group is just hydrogen. And cysteine, so the R group is a CH2SH. So we link them all together, forming these amide bonds. They're called peptide bonds in biochemistry. So now we've created a polypeptide. Polypeptides become proteins. Proteins are just long chains of amino acids linked together. So here we lost 3 waters. One here, and one here, and we joined together 4 amino acids. And when we name them, read about them, they're named from the amino end to the carboxylic acid end. See here it ends in an NH2, over here it ends in COOH. So we start at the NH2 end, so it's alanine, serine, glycine, cysteine. And these are actually official abbreviations: ALA, SCR, GLY, CYS. So here's a typical protein: bovine pancreatic trypsin inhibitor, BPTI. Should be obvious what's going on from this picture. Yeah, I know it's not. We'll try to explain it later. This is a simplified version. And hopefully by the time we get done going through this, you'll know what that all means. Proteins have several different structures. The primary structure is the sequence of amino acids in the protein. So we start putting together these things, the alanine, glycine, serine, and that's the primary structure. Now think about it. You have 20 amino acids. How many different combinations can you make? Pretty much an infinite number of combinations, because proteins are many, many polypeptides long. So let's say it's 100 amino acids long. You could have, and you could use each one more than once. You could have alanine, alanine, glycine, glycine, and you can have alanine, glycine, 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 all, so an infinite number of combinations. So now we have this long chain. So there's, I put all the amino acids, I got a long chain. So that would be the primary structure. Well, they're close to each other and they have charges and they can form hydrogen bonds, and it forms a secondary structure. Three types of secondary structure. First one is an alpha helix. An alpha helix is essentially a coil. All right. Take back, way back, probably for some of you to your early childhood. Phones, especially wall phones, had a long cord, and you know how the cord was coiled? That's an alpha helix. Another one they could form is called a beta sheet. A beta sheet would take this and fold it back on itself. So a beta sheet would become like that. And then the last one, irregular, is it's just all over the place. So that's the secondary structure. The secondary structure is held in place. Look at some pictures. So here's an alpha helix. And you can see how the atoms wind around like a staircase. And what holds it in this shape are hydrogen bonds between one of the molecules and the molecule above it. So we said hydrogen bonds are weak bonds, but they're still bonds. And it holds it in that shape. So this is a beta sheet, secondary structure, where this comes out, it's going to loop back. And again, you can see here, it's held in place by these hydrogen bonds. So when it loops back on itself, it's like folding the sheet, it's held in that position by these hydrogen bonds. So that's the secondary structure. There's a tertiary structure. My God. The specific overall shape of the protein is called its tertiary structure. So there, okay, people had, I don't know, people here have had those wall phones with those long cords. Okay, you're stretching it back and forth and around it. What actually happens after a couple weeks? It gets all, yeah, a big clump. That would be the tertiary structure. Is that big clump. And that's held in place again by hydrogen bonds, something called disulfide bonds, and salt bridges. So that would be the tertiary structure. So thinking about this phone cord, describe its shape. It's all tangled up. It's just a big, give me a description, big glob. So, Guess what we call those type of proteins? Globular proteins. All right? They didn't really take a lot of time to think about it. They go, looks like a glob. Let's call it a globular protein. So, here we have cysteine. Remember we said cysteine has a CH2 and an SH? And this doesn't really do it. So the protein, long chains of amino acids. So here you have a long chain, and it curls around and maybe comes back here. So here you have your SH here, and here you have your SH here. You have a reaction. And you form a disulfide bond, two sulfurs, just like here. That holds that curve, that curl. So it turns out that people that have extra curly hair have a large amount of cysteine in their hair protein. So when their hair curls, this disulfide bonds form and it holds that curl. And there's a couple ways you can get rid of it. People want their hair relaxed or straightened. You can use heat. That temporarily breaks these bonds. And of course, you go out, especially if it's damp, back together again. You can treat it with a chemical. Chemical relaxer, it's usually an ammonia-based. So if you ever go in a beauty shop when someone's having it done, you get that, or by the cosmetology people down there, you get that weird smell. That's an ammonia-based relaxer. And you have to be careful. You leave it in too long. I don't know if anybody's ever had it done. It burns. Cusses the face. And that breaks these bonds too. And that actually will last a long time if you chemically relaxed. Because what they do is they chemically relax it, straighten it, and they treat it with something else, which forms the bonds and holds it straight. So you're fine until the new hair grows out, and the new hair is curly again. Hydrogen bonds, so those are weak bonds. And where are we now? And salt bridges. Some of the R groups could have a salt bridge that holds them together. So we go back and look at our protein structure, and instead of drawing out all the amino acids, and you can draw out all the amino acids, you can imagine, if you're talking about 300 amino acids, how complicated that would look. So they kind of use this little cartoon thing. So where you have the two yellow balls next together, that's a disulfide bond. Here, this ribbon, well, it's not a ribbon, a rocket, whatever this is, it's called a beta sheet. So we got a beta sheet structure here. Where we have here, looks like an alpha helix. It's an alpha helix part here. And the rest of this green line, is all irregular. So that would be the shape of the protein. Okay? So, remember this is held in place, the alpha helix is held in place by hydrogen bonds. This is an actual covalent bond, disulfide. Beta sheets held in by hydrogen bond. So what do you think would happen if I heated this? What do you think would happen to all those weak bonds? They would break. So what do you think would happen to the structure? It falls apart. We have a term for that. Anybody know what the term is? Well, no. This is its natural shape. When we heat it, the natural shape falls apart. You ever hear about denaturation? Denaturation is the falling apart of the tertiary structure and the secondary structure of a protein. It doesn't break the primary structure. The amino acids are still linked together, but they fall apart from their tertiary structure. Anybody got an example? How many people eat breakfast? Really? Okay, you fry an egg. The white of the egg is clear when you put it in the pan. Those are proteins. When you heat it, the tertiary structure falls apart. It all comes apart. So now you have all these strands of protein. The strands of protein all mix together and they get all matted up. That's when it turns white. So we've denatured, got it away from its natural shape. And we can break apart salt bridges too. Go back here. So that happens a lot. Now, the shape of a protein determines its activity. Proteins, enzymes are proteins. And I'm going to put in a blank page. So we talked about it having a 3D shape, a globular shape, a lot of times. So there's our protein. It has a globular shape. Or our enzyme. So now we got to have something This is our substrate. That's the thing that we want to react. Well, you can see this fits into there, parks right in there. So we have an enzyme. The enzyme brings in the substrate. The enzyme is a catalyst. It causes it to react very quickly. So these two join together, make an enzyme-substrate complex. The reactions occur very quickly. So our body reactions occur very quickly. If we do something to disrupt this, change its shape, those two can't interact. So whatever's reaction has stops. That can lead to disease. Or, in some cases, we can treat the disease. If this is serotonin, serotonin is our naturally occurring mood lifter, and this is an enzyme called monoamine oxidase, which chews up serotonin. If we have too much monoamine oxidase, we chew up all our serotonin. We become depressed. Clinically depressed, not like, damn, I'm here on a Wednesday, it's the day before Thanksgiving. Okay, talking about clinic, well, some of you may be clinically depressed by that, but anyway. So they give you what's called an MAOI, a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. What is that? Well, they went and designed a drug. Let's see. That had a similar shape over here. This goes in and parks itself in the enzyme. Well, if this is parked in there, you can't bring the serotonin in there. So the serotonin builds up, and you feel better. Okay? That's a lot of the design about drugs. It's manipulating enzymes. So a lot of diseases or conditions are caused by enzyme, either too much, too little, not enough, to do what it needs to do. And it all has to do with that tertiary structure. The tertiary structure is derived from the secondary structure. Secondary structure is derived from the primary structure. So depending on how you put these amino acids together determines what the other structure looks like. And it turns out that several years ago, they designed a machine that could take a protein and break it apart. Like that long chain, and you start at one end and you clip everything off, and it would tell you what amino acids were in there. So now let's say you had a protein that had 100 amino acids. You would have the blueprint. Then they built a machine that would put them together. So you'd have all your 20 amino acids on the top. And you say, okay, I need alanine, alanine, glycine, serine, so forth, and so forth. So it would start with alanine, add another alanine, go through procedure, add whatever. So at the end, you'd have all 100. It's called amino acid synthesizer. So now you have these 100 amino acids that people are going, well, okay, we got the primary structure. How are you going to fold it? You know, and that was a big worry. Well, it turns out if you put it in a solution of physiological pH, it folds itself. It knows what's to do. So all they did was dump it in there, and it would go, and voila, you have your protein.
And why is it so important for it to fold?
You got to have this shape to interact with, become an enzyme. If it's just laying out there, it isn't doing anything.
So our body is built on that system.
Pretty much. Now, when we do metabolism, when we eat meat and that, we break down all the proteins into the amino acids. We take those amino acids and reassemble them into the proteins we need for our body to function. And that's done through transcription and translation with the DNA. So our DNA is coded to say, hey, we need this protein, and this protein. Okay, here's a whole box of amino acids, which we got from eating meat and whatever, soy if you're vegetarian, and beans and that. Now let's reach into this box and put them together to give us what we need.
What happens if you have too many of them? What happens if you take too much amino acid and that kind of stuff?
Pretty much nothing. I think it's flushed out.
What's that?
All right. Triglycerides, fats and oils. Okay, a triglyceride. If we look here, here, and here, we can see that originally we had three alcohol groups. Remember, 3 carbons with alcohol groups was called glycerol. We did that a few slides ago. So this is glycerol. We react it with 3 carboxylic acids. They may be the same, our groups may be the same, they may be different. If you look, well, what do we got here? HHO, water. So again, it's a condensation reaction. Remember, we took an amine and a carboxylic acid and made an amide for proteins. Well, here we're taking a carboxylic acid and an alcohol, and we're ending up with C double bond R, C double bond O, O R. Remember what that was? An ester. Okay. So we end up with 3 esters. Glycerol, all 3 of them are reacted. It's a triglyceride. If only 2 of them reacted, and we're left with C double bond OH down here, it would be a diglyceride. If only 1 of them reacted, it would be a monoglyceride. The fats and oils are triglycerides. So you go to the doctor, you get your blood test, they give you a triglyceride level. So here is a saturated triglyceride, tristyrene. Remember when we talked early on about when he did carboxylic acids, the example they give you was stearic acid? Remember that big, long one? Well, this stearic acid, stearic acid, stearic acid. So that's why it's called tristyrene. So a triglyceride is made of fatty acids, these are called fatty acids, and glycerol. So we have lots of different triglycerides in our body. Okay, where are we? All right. So there's a line drawing of it. You kind of see how these, if we had a whole bunch of them, could pack together, these would just fit in each other, they would lock up nice and tight. Remember that. We're going to change something. I don't know. Yes. Now we're putting in a double bond, or some double bonds, and you can see how that changes the shape here. So it's no longer just zigzag, it's up and over, here's a couple, here's a couple. They're not going to pack together very well. When you have a double bond, that's called unsaturation. Carbon-carbon single bonds are saturated. They have all the hydrogens. If you have a double bond or triple bond, that's unsaturated. So here we have an unsaturated triglyceride. It can't pack together as well as a saturated glyceride. So guess which one's going to have the higher melting point? The one that packs together nice and tight, or the one that can't? The one that can. When it packs together, it's holding on to each other. It can really interlock. To melt, you got to pull that apart. So the ones that are kind of like, we're not really, it's easier to pull them apart. So the saturated ones are your fats. The unsaturated ones are your oils. They call liquid triglycerides. That's the fancy term for oil. And we saw those double bonds. Let's go back a minute. We saw those double bonds. We had a carbon and went up, over, and down to another carbon. Well, there's actually a hydrogen here and a hydrogen here. We saw that that's what this is. Okay? When you have a carbon-carbon double bond, you can either have both items on the same side or one on opposite sides. You cannot twist that carbon-carbon double bond. If they're both on the same side, they're called cis. If they're on opposite sides, they're called trans. So if we go back and look here, these are all cis because the hydrogens are on the same side. Okay. So natural oils are all cis. And because this has many double bonds, what's a term for many? A prefix for many? Poly. So this would be polyunsaturated. Ever heard the term of polyunsaturated fats? There we go, or polyunsaturation. That's where that comes from. Okay, we did this, we go here. Well, we can take these double bonds and add hydrogen to them and make them saturated. So now we're back to a single bond. So, we said when we had fats Triglycerides, where everything was saturated, they had higher melting. They were your fats, your lards, and that kind of stuff. Polyunsaturated are your oils. Coconut oil, your corn oil. So, okay. So unsaturation means you lower the melting point. That's why it's an oil. Okay. Get up in the morning, going back to breakfast again. I'm hungry. Okay. You denatured your eggs. Now you have your toast. You open up the refrigerator and you pull out your butter. Your butter is hard as a rock. You try to spread it on your toast. But you can go and you can buy spreads, soft butters. Where do you get soft butter from? You take an oil and you start adding hydrogen to it. Yeah. Hydrogenate it. So you start raising the melting point. And you get to the point where it's not as hard as butter, but it's not an oil. It's in between. Margarine, for example. So now you can make spreadable butter. And you may see this on packages, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, which means they took vegetable oil, added hydrogen to raise the melting point. You see that a lot on cakes and cookies. Why? Because it's a lot easier to handle the solid than the liquid. Number one. Number two is, okay, you're going to make cookies. Christmas time's coming. Everybody makes Christmas cookies. I make wonderful chocolate chip cookies. I use Crisco. Water. You could also use vegetable oil. Why wouldn't you want to use vegetable oil?
It flattens the cookie out.
It's a flat cookie, and it's all mushy and that because it's an oil. So to get that mouthfeel that people like with cookies, they hydrogenate the vegetable oil. Vegetable oil is cheaper than lard, so they take it, they hydrogenate it. So now they got something to make the cookie taste better, or at least feel better in your mouth. Right?
The trans fats, aren't they the bad ones for your body?
Yes, and we'll get to that in a minute. As opposed to the regular fats, which are just wonderful for your body? Okay.
Well, no.
So here's a hydrogenation example. Here's a typical vegetable oil molecule. And you can see it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double bonds. We can add hydrogen to it, and this is what they got. And they got rid of all of them except one. They left one. So the melting point goes up. So that's typical in margarine. So margarine is a little softer than butter. And then if you leave more in there, you can actually make it a little softer, so now you get the spreadable. And they call them spreads. They don't call them butters. And the hydrogenation is reversible. So you add the hydrogen, you get rid of the double bond. However, during the process, it can go back the other way. And it turns out, if it's got a choice to go back to the cis or trans, it goes back to the trans, the unnatural form. That's where your trans fats come from. Those were, for a while they ignored them, who cares, but now they found out they're bad for you. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oils contain trans fats. So they had to come up with a process to remove them. So now a big thing now is you'll see boxes of whatever you're buying, cookies or that says, contains no trans fats. So they made a partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, and they did a process to remove the trans fats.
Is that any better?
Well, yeah, the trans fats are the ones with fat. So now you got something that's more like lard.
So you'll actually put it in your body, it'll break down and pass through without turning hard, clotting things up. So,
In moderation.
Well, I thought the trans fats that were soft initially go in your body and get hard.
Yes.
Okay, and they're harder to move through your blood system.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So what's shortening? Is that like the same thing?
Crisco in that? It's partially hydrogenated vegetable oil.
But isn't it really, really bad for you? Because like, my mom said it's really bad for you and she did try it, but she says everything's bad for me.
I hate to tell you this, but you're going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's probably not the best
Yeah.
for you. You're better off with lard
Mm-hmm.
because of it, unless they remove the trans fats. But again, you know, unless you're eating fried chicken every day that's been cooked in Crisco, or you make Christmas cookies and eat 2 dozen of them a day, you're probably not gonna.
Yeah.
Again, in moderation. Olestra is a fat substitute. So here's a triglyceride. Remember we talked about shape? Here is olestra. It's got a part of it that's a similar shape. Now the way olestra works is that it goes in and binds to the sites where your fat is absorbed. So when you eat food with fat in it, it can't be absorbed. There's nowhere to get into. This is blocking it. So this is what's used in the diet drug Ally. Ally is a form of olestra. So you take that and essentially block all the sites where you absorb fat. Now Ally comes with a little book, a little diet book. You have to follow that diet book. Well, you don't. But if you eat something, sit down and eat, like, 6 slices of greasy pizza on that or something, it'll work. One of the side effects for Ally, if you read it, is anal leakage. Because now you have all that oil, remember oil's liquid fat, going through your body, it can't be absorbed. So it gets to the bottom, and since it's not solid, you try to hold it in. It's coming out. Which is why you can't eat a lot of fat with that. Which also helps you lose weight. Go ahead, eat all the celery you want because there's no fat in celery. Potato chip company came out with Olestra potato chips a couple years ago. The whole thing was, go ahead, eat them. You can't absorb the fat. But if you sat there watching the football game and you ate a bag of potato chips, by halftime you'd spend the second half in the bathroom because it's all going through. Okay?
That's a good trick from one of the guests, huh?
Steroids. Okay. Steroids are also triglycerides. People don't think about that. This is the basic skeleton of a steroid. 3 6-membered rings and a 5-membered ring. And I'm not going to, there's a numbering scheme that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So that's what the basic steroid skeleton looks like. Cholesterol, there's your basic steroid skeleton. You got a big chain off the top here in 17 position, 2 methyl groups, a hydroxyl group, and a double bond. It occurs naturally in your body. We need cholesterol. We don't need a lot of cholesterol. We need cholesterol. Now, some people who say, oh, I have high cholesterol. Some of it is naturally occurring due to your genetics. Okay, so no matter what you do on your diet, you're probably not going to lower it. I don't care how many Cheerios you eat. Okay? So, here are some of the hormones. Hormones are enzymes that we make. Progesterone, ladies' hormone. 17-hydroxyprogesterone, androstenedione, which is a precursor to testosterone. So this is what, what's his face, Mark McGuire was taking as a natural substance. It's what they call a prodrug or a pre-drug to testosterone. Yeah, testosterone was banned and was illegal. This you could get at GNC. So you take this, it's broken down in your body, metabolites the testosterone. So you're getting the same effect. I think since that, they made that illegal. Notice there's not a lot of difference between female hormones and male hormones. And we have both in our body. Progesterone is the ones associated with pregnancy. And we have other ones here. And there's testosterone, male hormone, and there's estradiol, female hormone. So the estrogens are the female characteristics, the testosterone is the male. We have both in our body. Progesterone tends to come in when you're pregnant. So really what birth control pills do is trick your body into thinking it's pregnant all the time. And it's cycled through, which is why you got to have a little thing with all the numbered pills, and you have to take them in sequence because you're changing your hormones up and down. So if you start taking excess to get you can actually administer one of them and just say Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
Okay, you can do that. You can change yourself. Women bodybuilders who take a lot of testosterone, if you ever see them, besides the muscles, you tend to get a square jaw, develop an Adam's apple, lower voice. Yes. So you can change things up. All right. We can talk about a couple different types of reactions. We said when we put something together and lose water, it's condensation. We can add water, break something apart, it's called hydrolysis. So here, if we take an ether and add water, we get 2 alcohols. We could take the amide, remember from the protein, hydrolyze it, and get the amine and the carboxylic acid. Now, when we hydrolyze proteins, we end up getting amino acids because the carboxylic acid and the amine are both part of the same molecule. Esters, we hydrolyze, we get back the alcohol and the carboxylic acid.
And all this is done in the lab, right? You can't just drink excess water with it.
It's done in your body, too. It's called metabolism. Remember we talked about starch as a long chain of glucose molecules? The glycosidic bond is an ether bond. We break that down into individual glucose molecules. That's done through hydrolysis. Okay? A couple places hydrolysis is done enzymatically. It starts in your mouth. Remember we saw the Thanksgiving thing? Breaks them down into maltose, and now you got 2 glucose molecules. Down in your stomach is full of acid. That starts breaking it down, doing the hydrolysis reaction. Now you got 2 glucose molecules. Now you start doing the rest of the metabolism, glycolysis. Break it down into ultimately carbon dioxide and water, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. Proteins, when you eat that, aren't digested in your mouth. They start digesting in your stomach. You've got acid again, strong acid. I mean, this is not low, weak little acid. You got really strong acid. You can dissolve metal. So the meat doesn't stand a chance. And you got other enzymes in there, pepsins and that start breaking those apart. Esters, you find some of those in fruits. You start breaking those apart again in your stomach. So, disaccharides, in food get broken down into monosaccharides. Polysaccharides get broken down to glucose. Proteins get broken down to amino acids. Triglycerides get broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. And all of these can be used again in, this is the metabolism, anabolism, and our catabolism breaking down. Anabolism was when you build back up. Wash you again. So, if you think about steroids, not all of them build muscle. Certain ones, we have corticosteroids. You know, if you have shoulder injury, knee injury, joint injury, they give you a shot of cortisone. Cortisone is a steroid. But it's not going to make you big muscles. It's not going to make your voice go lower. It may make your voice go higher when you get the shot. You go, ah. But other than that, the ones that build muscles are called anabolic steroids, meaning building up muscles. So. Also, fats and oils, when we break them apart, we can break them apart using base. So we get glycerol, and we get the salt of the fatty acid. Anybody know what that process is? Take a fat, take some base, mix them together, it falls apart, you get glycerol, and you get the salt of the fatty acid. It's a process known as saponification. Anybody? Your great-great-grandparents probably did it in the backyard. They take some animal fat, put it in a kettle with some water, add some lye. Soap, that's how you make soap. Lye soap. We just recently had some kind of program here at the Arboretum where they taught people how to make soap for the holidays. And we can disrupt salt bridges. There we go. So in the mid, we break down into a carboxylic acid into the amine by hydrolysis. There's no hydrolysis is adding water, condensation is removing water. So enzymes, we talked about those are proteins, are naturally occurring catalysts. They speed the chemical reaction changes without permanently altering themselves. The chemicals they act on are called substrates. So it's very specific, I said, to the shape. The old method was called lock and key. The enzyme was a lock, the substrate was a key. Very specific. Positions of binding groups which attract substrates to the active site portion of the enzyme where the reaction occurs. And there's positions of catalytic groups that speed the reaction. So how does a catalyst work? Again, we did an experiment here where I blindfolded everyone in the room, spun you around so you got disoriented, and said, okay, your job is to get out in the hallway. Turn off the lights. I mean, you're really blindfolded. You'd stumble around, hit the chairs and that. Some of you probably try to go out that door. But eventually you'd all get out this door. So now I blindfold everybody except one person. He doesn't have a blindfold on. Same reaction, so to speak. You have to get out. What's going to happen? She's going to grab everybody, throw them out the door. Okay? It's going to go a lot faster. The end result's still the same, but we got there a lot faster because we had a catalyst. So that's what an enzyme does. Because you think about when a reaction occurs, two molecules have to come together, first of all, with sufficient force to react, but in a specific orientation. They can't, this doesn't do any good, they have to come like this. So what the enzyme does is grab the molecule that's reacting, orient it, Okay, now it can react. Again, think about it. If I blindfolded everybody, said, okay, you got to meet somebody and front to front, shake hands. Okay, you're going to be wandering around, you can hit somebody from behind, from the side, it's not going to work. Take the blindfold off one person, well, they're going to grab two people, turn them so they're in the right orientation to react. That's what an enzyme does. So it provides a different path to products that has more stable intermediates and therefore requires less energy. And it gives the correct orientation each time. So it requires less energy, goes faster, which is a good thing, otherwise it would take you like 3 days to get from here to the door. Okay. Now on a completely different, well, somewhat different product. We're talking about polymers. Again, a protein is a polymer. A lot of amino acids join together. Carbohydrates, starches are polymers. A bunch of glucose joined together. Well, we can take this molecule, a diamine, which is an amino group on both ends, and a dicarboxylic acid, which is a carboxylic acid on both ends. Remember, if I join this and this, lose water, condensation. Okay, I choose, but now I have a COOH on this end. I could join this with another diamine on this end, and another carboxylic, and I can just keep building. So we do this a lot of times. So that's what the little N means. There's just a lot of them linked together. If I have an amine, diamine, and dicarboxylic acid, I make a polymer called nylon. And depending on the diamine and the dicarboxylic acid, I can make variations of nylon. If I have 6 carbons here, 6 carbons here, it's called nylon 66. 6 carbons here, 10 carbons here, it's called nylon 610. Different nylons have different properties. I wish I could do the demonstration for you, but you could take carboxylic acid, dissolve it in water, diamine, dissolve it in an organic liquid, so you have 2 phases. Right at the interphase, you reach in with a paper clip, the reaction occurs, you can grab the nylon and just pull it out. And it gets string. Essentially, that's how they make nylon. So there's nylon 66. Okay, we can take an alcohol and an acid. When they condense, we make an ester. If we do this a lot of times, we end up with a polyester. So that's used a lot in fabrics. All right, when it first came out back in the 60s. Disco. Okay, I had polyester leisure suits. I mean, they were really tacky. I mean, that fabric was really, ooh. If one of them is terephthalate, you get polyterephthalate. So you get a lot of different esters. The thing about the original polyester fabrics is they were tacky feeling, plus dissolve real easily. I had, in graduate school, I had a student was taking organic chemistry. She had a polyester top. It's kind of loose fitting. She had a graduated cylinder full of acetone. She spilled it. The acetone ran to the edge, hit the polyester top, dissolved it like immediately, all the way up. So, interesting lab. Ethylene. Okay, it's not a condensation reaction. If I draw another ethylene next to it, I can take this double bond, move it over here, joins this, that moves this double bond over here, and so forth. I get a whole bunch of them. Polyethylene. And if you look on bottles, you may see either HDPE or LDPE. HDPE stands for high density polyethylene. Those are probably like the little soda bottles there. Then you have LDPE, low density polyethylene. They tend to be more squishier.
Oh, that's what they put on those new plastics now. That won't radiate chemical,
You won't have the phthalates?
right. It's microwavable, that's safe.
Yes, supposedly.
For the next one, that's just.
So then we can combine these different polymers. They call copolymers. Now you can make an infinite number of plastics. If we start with vinyl chloride, looks like ethylene except we have chlorine, we get polyvinyl chloride or PVC. Okay, that's found in pipes. You can go to Lowe's, get PVC pipes. Some of you may have PVC plumbing in your house. Those are called addition polymers because we swing that double bond. They're not condensation, they're called addition polymers because we're just swinging that double bond over. So we can have polyethylene, polypropylene, polyvinyl chloride, polystyrene, styrofoam, polystyrene. And you can make that in several different forms. You can get with a lot of air holes in it, which is really good for insulation because the air holes are, or you can get like the coolers, where you don't see any air holes. It's real high density. Depends on how they make it. Thermoplastic. So thermoplastic, and I worked with plastic companies for a while. A thermoplastic kind of plastic you can melt and reform. So they're used in building and construction, packaging, other transportation equipment, furniture, electrical equipment. So sometimes you can break something that's a thermoplastic, heat the ends, melt it, put it back together, and solidify. They tend to be weaker plastics. Then you have the thermoset plastics. Those are the kind, once they're molded, you can't reheat it. I mean, you can melt it, but I mean, you can't reform it. It's done. It's locked together. A lot of use in building and construction because they're stronger plastics. There are things like ABS, acrylic butadiene styrene, which is motorcycle helmets and that. They take hard hats. A lot of impact in that. And the final slide. If you look on the bottom of your containers, it'll tell you how to recycling, the different recycling codes. I think they're still in effect. Polyethylene terephthalate, high density polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, low density polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, and other. Probably most of the things are other because they're a combination of different plastics. And